Good morning. My name is Bill Pollack, and we're at the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles, and it's July 16th, 2001. And my guests today, this morning, are Ray Brock and Ack Miller, and both of them have a fascinating background, and we're here to hear a little bit about it. Ray or Ack, one of you just...
Well, we're going to talk, I guess, from the ground up, but basically, my story is, of course, coming from Europe, we didn't have cars in Europe, just cows and pigs and stuff. And so when I come over here at 5 years of age, I saw Model T Fords and Chevy Fords, and I had 3 brothers, and they poisoned my soul because they made me love automobiles, climb underneath them, and do the dirty work. We had no creepers in them days, and so I could lay in the dirt and do the job. I still loved the cars. And so, boom, we started going, and the next thing you know, we're going up to a thing called Muroc Dry Lake Speed Trials. And my brother and I had just built a 4-cylinder Chevy, and I got the job, because I was 15 years old, I got the job of being towed on a chain up to Muroc Dry Lake. Of course, it's Edwards Air Force Base now. And we got up there, and the car run fine, and I had my 3 brothers and myself there. And we got ready to go. It was time for my brother, Siegfried was his name, and got ready to go, and we call him Zeke. Hey, Zeke, we didn't have driving suits. Helmets, we had leather helmets. Yes, real leather helmets. And so Zeke looked at me and he said, "Are you shaking?" He's nervous as all hell. And he said, "Do you want to drive it?" I said, "Hell yes." So I had my good helmet, put it on, and I went 92 miles an hour in my Chevy, 28 Chevy Roadster. And Zeke and I built it, so it was a big thing, real big. The first time we had a drag race, 6 cars, and I crapped out. Typical Ray Brock thing. He left the, loose in the distributor. And
I didn't do that. He didn't even know me then.
Well, I had to blame Ray, of course. Yeah, I did it. So I found out human beings can make mistakes, especially when they're in a hurry. I left a condenser loose. And I caught hell from that for quite a few months after that. Probably lost my ride too, I might add. No, that was the beginning of my love for hot rodding. And hell, I couldn't get it out of my system, of course. And from there, we joined the clubs and Roadrunners I was in. And Wally Parks was with me in the Roadrunners Club. And we would meet, and of course, we would talk about the latest thing we had for whatever we had, Craigar or Riley Fort Ford or a Chevy, whatever. And this was great conversation because everybody had really something different. The carburetor was different and everything was different. So we'd have a lot to talk about. And pretty soon it got down to the thing, where do we go to test these things? Thank God they just built a nice stretch of road down here. We'll try that. So then we started drag racing on the streets. Of course, there was no drag race anywhere else. Where the hell you going to go? You couldn't. So we would try it out on the street, and then the police, of course, got very, very violent about it, nasty. And they started calling us hot rodders, which was not an endearing term, believe me. When we first started, you called me a hot rodder, you could have got bloodied a little. But later on, Wally got thinking about it politically. He said, "If they're going to give it to us, let's accept it." And I said, "Jesus, after that, yeah, okay, we can do that." So then later on, of course, Wally got doing the big thing on getting this thing organized, and then I got stepped up in the president of our Roadrunners Club for thing, and then finally the president of the association that run the drag race. And it really got developed into hot rodding and stuff. In the meanwhile, back at the ranch, that wasn't enough. So the real guys that was doing it good were the sporty car boys. They were just coming along. They had the real sports cars come in, the MT, like that's where I met you was out there. And formally I didn't meet you because there wasn't anything close enough to shake your hand. This guy was a terror on the track. I was nothing. But there's a lot of guys that was out there. They're a hell of a lot better than probably either one of us. But we got to meet some good ones. I liked my sports car experience. It was just another hot rod with a different set of fenders or whatever you call it. Hell with it. But it was fun. Good experience. And so here I am, 80 years old. I still like them.
So how did you two meet?
That was a bad day. It was. I think it was up at Bonneville, probably about 1950, 49 or 50. And I had gone up there with some friends of mine, and there's just wandering around the pits and saw this guy that looked a little familiar. I'd seen him maybe at a car show or something in the past, and started nosing around his car, and it was obvious he didn't know what he was doing because he needed a lot of help, so I decided to help him out, and that's where we've sort of got together. He's always needed help in his cars, and I'm the only guy who can straighten him out.
I see.
So anyway, that was Bonneville, and that's 50 years ago now, or a little over 50 years ago. And of course, in those last 50 years, a lot of things have taken place. ACT just commented on the formation of the National Hot Rod Association, and this year, 2001, is the 50th anniversary of NHRA. And the first Bonneville is 49, so that's a little over 50 years. So a lot of things have taken place in the last 50 years, and a lot of good things. There have been a lot of magazines founded on the industry, a lot of different types of racing.
Yeah. This museum stemmed right from an $800 investment.
That's right.
In publishing a hot rod magazine.
And you can go back a little further to the southeastern part of the country where NASCAR is just over 50 years old this year. It's 51, I believe.
I think so.
Started in 1950, about the same time as the Mexican road race first race. And it all ties in together, and it's been a very successful run. And you look at the publicity from NASCAR and NHRA and all the various sports car events and car shows and car museums, and it's not getting any smaller. It's getting bigger every day.
It certainly is. Well, you two have raced a lot together. You've had
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun. We've since the early days. I first helped ACT down in Mexico in the Mexican road race in 1953 and 54. As a matter of fact, when I went to work for Hot Rod Magazine in 53, I had some experience working with sports cars. As a matter of fact, with a J2 Allard that a friend of mine owned. That was back in 51, 52. We used to run the sports car circuit. And when I found out ACT was going down to Mexico, I knew he needed help, like he always does. And
tell us about his car, because it was a very unique car. Describe, because I remember the first Carrera, and Ferrari was there. Or, I don't know.
Ferrari, the first year was 1950, and they were just stock cars, American.
That's right. There was the grocer. What was his name? That had the Chryslers. Or
Ray Crawford.
Ray Crawford, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But your car was a very unique car.
Yes, it was. Very unique. One of the things, part of my crew, some of them were nuts and some of them were this and that, but that is Ray Brock. Ray Brock was an engineer, really, and he is the only guy in the whole group that had an education worthy
And
of the name.
and a slide rule.
And he could read a slide rule, yes, and so I had the idea, the way it all started, I'll give you a little. In the first place, I had a sponsor with a brand new Oldsmobile, and remember the 52 Oldsmobile, the rocket in your pocket? Yeah. Well, the dealer says, would you like to ride with this driver of mine? You're a good mechanic, you know Oldsmobile. Sure, hell yes. So he turned out to be, well, he was Spanish or Mexican or something. Anyway, he took me for a ride. Well, hell, he couldn't drive as good as my mother, and she couldn't drive at all. So I told the man, I said, I'm going to ride with that guy. And he says, well, what I do? I got the car bought, and I got this. And you want to drive it? I said, hell yes, I'll drive it. So that's with the 52 olds. So my friend Doug, we're both getting a divorce at just conveniently at that same time. So it's goodbye, see you later. And we took off for Mexico and did the Mexican road race. And we got about halfway through the puppy, and the transmission let go on my Oldsmobile, right in the middle of this little town where they make all the shoes. Ray knows it well. And so we stopped and decided this is as far as we could go. Hell, it shook the windshield out of the car. It was so bad. So finally, when we got all through, we made about 2 weeks later. The reason it took us 2 weeks, we met some girls there. And there was no problem. There was no problem getting free lunches, believe me. And so later on, Doug my co-pilot, he fell madly in love with this young lady. She was pretty old, wasn't she? 13 or 14? 14, yeah. She was 14 years old, so she was quite along in years. And the priest says to him, you can't marry this lady unless you're of the Catholic faith. Oh, I am. Well, Doug, you know, he couldn't even spell it, much less go in the church. And so he run like hell home he knew a Catholic priest. Says, I'm in trouble in Mexico. In order for me to marry this girl, which she was serious, I have to prove that I'm a Catholic. And the priest says, that's easy here, and he signed them all. And he became a Catholic immediately. And then we went back, and he was married. But on the way home, we had to drive this Oldsmobile home 1,500 miles from where we were at Leon, Guanajuato. And we got talking. I said, you know, the way they build these damn cars, now that transmission shouldn't be put in a tractor. I hate it. That's terrible. So anyway, what would you use? A Cadillac, of course. 37 Cadillac. I have never broke one. I've broken everything else, hearts and everything else, but no transmission. So when we got all through, he said, well, that's interesting. Why don't we build something? And we were both hot rodders. In fact, Doug, one of the fastest guys at the first race we had up at Bonneville with the 32 rotor. Went pretty quick, 130-some mile an hour. And so Doug...
What's Doug's last name?
Doug Harrison.
Harrison.
Yeah. So anyway, Doug Harrison, he says, well, let's build one. So we started thinking what we're going to do to build one. The Oldsmobile engine I had no trouble. And the transmission I had no trouble with. I knew what I wanted. And I knew something I thought would stay together. The only thing was gearing, we needed an overdrive. Hell, I wouldn't trust anything we made in them days in an overdrive. No way. So I went out to the junkyard, saw this beautiful, magnificent specimen out of a Nash. Some old Nash, and don't ask me how old it was. It was an old bear. And I took it and I flipped it apart and I saw the machinery inside there. It was beautiful. And I thought, this is my overdrive. So I got it for $5 and no one else would buy it. And it weighed about that much too. So we got all that and I put it on the back of the Cadillac transmission. And then I had the overdrive. Because remember, if you're going to go long distance, you better not be buzzing them engines, you know, like 6,000 or 7,000. Forget it. Ferraris included. So then when we got all through, we had this car and almost made, and then Ray Brock come in and he thought we had done some bad stuff, which we had. And he took over.
I took my slide rule out. And
he took a slide rule, and he said, you don't have enough gas to finish half the goddamn race. So he set about to design a fuel tank with his slide rule and everything. And he come out and he said, now there you are. you got 40 or I forget, 41 gallons, and beautiful aluminum tank, and he had made it so it fit in every crevasse there was in the back of a 27 Model T Roadster. And there ain't any, you know. So anyway, he did it. And I got on his case. I said, that goddamn thing will hold 41 gallons. He said, it will, damn it, it will. So naturally, I had to do the dirty work and measure it, pouring the buckets in. And I had to lie a little about it. And I said, Ray, 36 gallons, all. No, I'll pull it. So we pulled it down. This is another thing. So Ray had his way. He measured it, and it was official, 41.3 tenths. So I had to give it to the engineer. He had it.
I was working for Hot Rod at that time, Hot Rod Magazine.
Yeah.
I had just gone to work, and Ack and Doug and a few other hangers-on were building this creation. That's a nice word for it. Creation, a hot rod over in his shop in Whittier. So Wally Parks assigned me the job of going over and covering the construction and seeing what this thing was going to be made of. And so, as I said earlier, Ack always needs help. And once I got over there and saw what he was doing, I decided I better give him a little advice. So giving advice, you know how that works. You end up doing the job yourself.
Right.
So all of a sudden, I'm part of the crew, and we put this, the world's ugliest sports car together in a sort of a record time. And just to make sure the thing would work, Ack and Doug jumped in the car and drove it all the way from Whittier down to almost the Guatemalan border. And I had brought Ack's old 50 Olds parts car with the rear seats out full of tires and oil and all that kind of stuff. And that's how we started the 1953 road race in Tuxtla Gutierrez.
That's right. Full thing. The nice thing about it, I think it's the only sports car that was ever driven from where it was made, in Whittier, California, clear down to the end of Mexico.
Yeah, from Whittier to Tuxtla must have been close to 3,000 miles.
Yeah.
Well, the race itself was 2,000,
yeah.
2,300. And
Right.
so it was, and then we had to stop rebuilding it in Leon. When we got down, this is where Doug's new little wife came from, and we got down to Leon, and the engine, the piston rings broke, didn't they? It was scuffing the walls. We had to,
It's sand. I had no air cleaners, you know.
Anyway.
We couldn't buy them.
we got in the local Chevrolet dealer down at Leon, Guanajuato, and we tore the car apart and did a
Reboard it.
board it and valve job and all that kind of stuff, and all the Mexicans in town came over and watched us and fed us tacos, and we really had a ball down there. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a very good thing on the way down. So we did bore it. The guy is nice, Chevrolet dealer too. He said, hey, anything I got is yours. And the man just, let me touch it, just watch, you know, the little mechanic. Hey, okay, take this hammer. And they were just tickled about the fact that we was in there. And we put it together, and by some luck or another, it stayed together. And
Did you run all the way? Did it make it through the
Sure
woods?
it did. We're the only car in the sports car class that did.
Not only did it run all the way down, but after the race, after the race itself at 2,300 miles, it ran all the way
It
back
ran
to
all the
Whittier
way back to Whittier.
at
yeah.
great speed.
I love it.
Yeah, with tickets and everything, but we called it the Caballo. That's Wally gave it that name, or the Iron Horse.
Caballo de Hierro, horse of
Yeah.
iron.
Yeah. So that name kind of stuck with it, and then we went back the following year, and we did a little better, moved up a couple of places. But the nice thing is, I knew the guys. Frank Curtis was a good friend of mine, real good, and he's just going out of business. He said, I want to give you this last Curtis car. And I says, boy, what about the body? Well, I don't have anything to do with the body. You got to have some guy. Well, hell, we couldn't hire a guy to, form the body. So we took the Curtis car type thing and took the main ideas from it. And I thought, well, we can't do that. So we just bought a doctor was there. Now, he never bought anything. This doctor was there, and he says, you need a chassis? I said, yeah. He says, I got one I'll give you. And so he gave the chassis, and it had independent front suspension, which I liked. And then the idea on the rear, I always like the transverse forward idea, you know, with one spring on the rear. So we put that in the rear. I thought, hell, it's good enough for old Henry. We'll give him his dues. And so we put it. That car was real, well, actually, it run 1,500 miles and run 92 or 3 miles an hour and average. And if you've ever been on the Mexican road, it was that really, in all honesty, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that Mexican road, there's a brand new road.
There's a brand new road,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I've been on that road, and it's, you know,
Yeah, it's twisty.
real twisty, and you don't know what's behind it, around it.
Exactly, yeah. You sure,
You're gonna memorize
you
that.
sure don't, yeah. One of the funniest things, Bill stopped, because he did everything very right, because Ford was paying the bill. So anyway, when they made this beautiful map, and you could unfold it as you were racing, and you could see where the bridge was and so on. So they give Doug and I one of them, and what a deal. So Doug's the co-pilot, and I said, okay, Doug, when you see anything that marked danger, knock on my knee or do something, and I can slow down. Yeah. So all of a sudden I see Doug's we're doing about 110, 15, and he had this map out like that, and he just took off. And I saw this map of 100 miles long. I said, Jesus, I ain't gonna stop and pick that thing up.
It's on the rollers.
Yeah, it's on the rollers, you know. So
Just start stripping off the rollers.
I just had to rely on my eyeballs, and when I saw a red light and I saw a bunch of Mexicans around this car, I knew it had crashed. And we saw plenty of that.
That was your hint. That was your hint. Anytime you came to a place where there was a bunch of the locals standing there on the side of the road, you knew they were waiting for a show.
That's
So
right.
get out of it and stand on the brakes.
Yeah. And we had the best of brakes. We had Lincolns, 12-inch Lincolns. And the reason we had them, Bill Stopp, of course, was our very good friend, and he fixed all the Lincolns up. And he just happened to have some parts left over, which would fit our axle, because we made it work that way. That's pretty good. And what do you know? The wheels and tires would work. Same as the Lincoln. And they would change tires every, what, 300 or 400 miles. They'd
Or
have,
less than that.
they'd have a thing. And
were
these
probably
tires,
mountainous regions, they'd shape-
hell, they
change
were
them every
new.
time.
They were a lot better than I would ever buy. And we just could take them and put them on our car, and we'd finish the race on what they rejected.
Well, you weighed half of what those Lincolns were.
Oh, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were, the roads down in lower Mexico particularly are very, very aggressive. They're made out of volcanic rock. It's just like running on carborundum. They just grind the rubber off. And so the big Lincolns, they'd go through a few corners, and they'd have the treads worked off of those things real quick like.
I'll bet.
But our Axe car was a lot easier on the tires. And he didn't drive quite as fast as the Lincolns either, did you, Jack?
I drive low and slow, yes. But remember, we had one thing. There's only one way we were going to get home, and that's I had to drive it.
So it'd save that car so we could drive
It
it
didn't
home.
do me no good to crash and say I was a hell of a driver. It looked like I was winning, but here I am. We couldn't do that. And then, too, I knew Doug was madly in love, and I didn't want to.
Did he ever get married? Did he marry that?
Oh, sure, he married, yeah. And they got 2 kids. One of them is a doctor in Leon, Guanajuato, and the other kid works out here in plastics.
As a matter of fact, this is an interesting story. The older son is Carlos. He was born in 1954, the day, just after the 53 race. He's a cardiac, he's a very famous, successful cardiac surgeon down in Leon, and 2 of his clients happen to be the mother and the father of Fox, the new president of Mexico.
New president, yeah.
They live right outside of Leon, and he's their personal physician.
Oh, my.
Yeah,
That's a
right.
story.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
So time marches on. We delivered the President Fox a new doctor. But Doug, we had, like I say, we had a real good crew, and Ray had his new car, and Chrysler. Ray was going like hell, I didn't know what woman he was carrying. He carried Nay for a while.
Oh, that
You
was
had more women in that goddamn car?
Wait a minute now.
Well, I mean, different ones.
So the race teams have to have their honey buns, you know.
Oh, Jesus.
Is that what they call them, honey buns?
Yes.
In 1953, when we were coming back during the race, Nay was down there, that's Doug's wife, and she was heavily pregnant, about 7 months. And so coming through Lyon, she wanted to go home, go back to Whittier. So I picked her up and put her in the back seat along with the parts. And we'd get the car serviced and we'd take off and run all night to get ahead of them so we'd pick them up when they came into the next place. And gosh, we had a wild ride one night. We were going down the highway at about 100 miles an hour. All of a sudden we ran into a big herd of wild horses. They were all over the road and I was all over the road and I missed them all and promptly slowed down after that. But we got Nay home, and a couple of months later, as I said, Carlos was born, and then they had another son later on after that. But she and Doug now have been married since 1953, 52, 53.
53, yeah. That's 53, I think.
That's 48 years.
Pretty good.
Still going strong, still living out in Whittier.
I'll be darned. That's great.
Yeah, so anyway, that as a group that we've stayed together, and God, Ray and I have, he took me over to Europe last year in England to Goodwood.
Took him to the Goodwood Festival of Speed.
Goodwood Festival of Speed, a hell of a thing. Boy, what an organization, the best race I've ever been to. It was very well organized.
Well, after the Mexican road race was stopped, 54 was the last year, and took the old Curtis chassis that Frank had given him, and he built another car to go to the Emilia in Italy. When was that, 57?
Yeah, 57.
57, then after 57, we needed something else to do, so somebody started racing down in Baja, so we went off-road racing for a number of years,
I remember that.
and we did real well. We were the first ones to ever have a pickup, which was very successful because it had a lot of road clearance. We were the first ones to ever have a automatic transmission.
Don't forget, yeah.
Power steering.
But the biggest thing, of course, Big Ray was doing this. I had a doctor, a very good friend of mine, Ostage, and he was the damn hot rodder. Just kind of dedicated. He'd buy a new Cadillac, you know, and would do something to the engine. But he wanted to be the world's fastest doctor, so I talked to Brock about it a little, and he says, well, let's make a jet car, because we knew the guy could get us jet engines free. So we got a couple of jet engines, and little by little, I had them tested over here at the university. There's 3,200 pounds of thrust, and so Ray knew Peter Firestone very well, so that got our tires. He made the aluminum wheels, forgings, and beautiful things. And then Ray designed this chassis, and it was just a frame with a jet engine in it and a barrel of oil. That's all it'd hold, would be 50-some gallons. So we got Doctor up on the line to be the world's fastest doctor, and he finally wound up at 360 miles an hour. So he was the world's fastest doctor.
We didn't have enough horsepower, and we had soft salt, and we had every excuse in the world you needed, you know. And so we only went 360. We went 360 3 times in a row, and we decided, well, that's all it has, so we parked it.
Yeah.
And about that time, Craig Breedlove and all the other guys came along with bigger engines and bigger budgets, and they put us on the trailer.
Easy.
360 miles an hour is not, you know.
But originally,
I got thrilled.
I was thinking a lot about it, and of course I was smart enough to know that fenders are a problem, and aerodynamics at that speed, of course I'd read enough that I didn't want to hurt the doctor, so I said, we'll just make it open wheeler. I didn't like, well, it's going to be a lot of work. So we just made a thing that hold the jet engine and had these big 18-inch wheels. God, they were big.
We had beautiful drawings on that thing. I'll tell you, we engineered that thing. We got a snap line and a chalk line, and we snapped lines on the garage floor and laid the metal down and cut them to fit the lines.
That's right. And
tacked them together, and then took them over to the shop and got them welded up, and that was our drawings. Every night we get ready to work on the car, we'd sweep the floor down and rub off the chalk.
Clean the drawing.
Start all over again.
But But the only time the doggone thing ever had any trouble, which is really up to Ray, was the left front wheel bearing. Froze up. And this axle, Chevrolet gave us a truck, pinnings, underpinnings. Ray knew somebody there. And yeah, we'll give you some goddamn truck axle. We had, I think it was about 1.25 inches, and he's going about 300 mile an hour, doctor was, and the left front wheel just took off. And it went faster than 300. And there the old thing went down, it never bothered it. Never even rumpled Ray's aluminum work underneath.
That's right.
It's amazing.
That thing was solid.
But it was made with that in mind, of course. We didn't want to hurt doctor. And then after we got through with him, my poor guy passed away with a man's problems, had cancer. Away he went. But he was
He was the world's fastest doctor for a while.
world's fastest doctor for a while, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted to be, you know. So it took a couple of hot rodder guys to help him do that. It meant quite a bit to him. And he didn't have to spend, he never spent any money on that, did he, Ray?
He used to give us free shots, keep us
Oh,
flowing.
free shots, yeah, right.
We get so tired, working nights after we do our
Jesus.
regular job. I'd leave the magazine, go over there and work until 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I get so tired I couldn't move, so he'd say, wait a minute, I'll fix you up. And he'd get in the back of his Chrysler 300C, and he'd open his bag up, and he'd pull out all these things and start loading up his big syringe. He'd get that thing loaded up like a big sausage, and he'd say, okay, bend over, and he'd drop your drawers, he'd give you a shot, and he'd say, well, that'll keep you going for a few more days.
I mean, B12.
Well, B12, everything. You can taste everything in the world when he give you that shot.
Love it. Dr. Feelgood.
And then we got to Bonneville, and this is the funniest thing. We got to Bonneville, and he was always carried his little medical kit with him and his toolbox and so forth, and we were down at the far end of the salt. We'd made a run down. We're getting ready to turn around and come back, and Doc had his car down there with all of his tools and his medical kit, and he put the stuff out to get something out of the trunk, and he promptly got in the car and backed over him. Backed over his toolbox.
Yeah, the brand new little toolkit. Oh, God, that was...
Yeah, we gave him a bad time.
That was really,
We didn't have a very serious race team. We had a lot of fun.
well, that's what the other serious guys always had their trouble.
On a jet engine, how was the throttle control? How did you regulate the throttle?
Opened it wide open.
Just had a
Oh,
full
yeah.
throttle.
It had a regular
Cable.
throttle,
So, but it just regulated the amount of fuel going in?
yeah. Yeah, just the fuel, yeah. And the old thing will pump air, but it won't pump fuel, so when you get the two together, why, then you got it. You know, the nice thing about that, we had one thing. We had made some inlets that, well, Ray and all of us made these things, and they're, like the hot rodder would do. Put it up and laminate it the best you could.
Fiberglass.
Fiberglass. Oh, this is good. And the guy from Ray knew this guy called LeMay, General Curtis LeMay. Well, he's the hot rodder.
Yeah,
And so I met him very early in the goings, really. So he used to come over to see when I was building my first hot rod in Huntington Park, he'd come over there. Of course, he wasn't a general, but this guy from Texas was a good friend of his. He had his car in there. But this was just one of the greatest eras. And the more you got to know people, it come off. And, well, I think Ray could tell you, we had a little trouble with the jet engine, and we needed a starter. Well, hell, where are you going to get a starter for that? So he calls Curtis LeMay. He's a general. He says,
charge a sack.
yeah, he says, we'll have
We'll
have one delivered. And Ray says, well, Jesus Christ, we've got to run tomorrow. He says, stand by. He says, we'll have something in flight for you. And here comes some, you can't land on Bonneville, but the airport where the Enola Gay took off is right there. So the guy comes in there with his airplane and delivers a starter to Ray.
They flew it in from Hill Air Force Base out by Salt Lake, and
Yeah.
we got it There's one good thing about, this jet engine. We got two of them when the Ack and Doc Osage found these jets. They got a wing pod off of a B-36 bomber. It had two jets on it, two J-47 jet engines. So we got to look at the logs on the engines, found the one that had the fewest hours. We figured that's the best one, we'll save it. And we took the other one and gave it to a guy.
The school did the testing now.
Northrop Institute over by the LA airport.
Yeah.
We said, we'll give you an engine if you show us how to make it run. So they had no experience with jet engines either in those days. So they started working on this thing, and they got all their manuals out, and they figured out how to make it work. And then they called us over, and we went over and saw how simple it was. It's easy. Just put fuel in the thing and crank it up and hit the igniter, and it burns.
Yeah.
And so we were jet experts in a big hurry there.
We could grind the valves on a jet engine, yeah. I doubt that was common.
Oh, and then the other thing, we had a little trouble when the wheel came off. We figured that was 1959 or 60, something like that. And a bunch of guys used to stop by the shop in the evenings to see what was going on. And we were redesigning the heavier suspension and beefing things up. And all of a sudden, one evening, here comes a couple of guys from Lockheed Skunk Works. A fellow by the name of Fish Salmon and Tony Levere. And then there's another fellow by the name of Irv Culver. And Irv Culver, he was the engineer. He also had a slide rule.
Yes, he did. Big one.
A little 6-inch slide rule went in his shirt pocket. But we said, this thing seems like it wants to swap ends. We got to get it going straight. What should we do? And he said, well, you can put on a drogue chute. But that's not a very good idea. You can put on a fin rudder. Well, what kind of a rudder? Well, just make a rudder about so big and so this and that. Well, how big? So he gets his little slide rule out and he starts, okay, you make it so long, I forget how many, maybe it's 30 inches long at the base, and you taper it to the top. You make it so thick and so forth. And he says, and we said, well, what's the whole idea behind this rudder? And he says, it's drag. Put it on the tail end of the car, and it holds the tail end of the car back. That makes the front go straight. It's like the feathers on an arrow. So that's how we got this thing to run straight. We put a nice little fin on the thing.
Right.
And ran straight as an arrow after that, up to 360, and we wouldn't go any faster. But Irv Culver gave us our straightener for the car.
Right out of the Lockheed.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful. The guys that just come around and talk to you, don't make it whether you're a hot rodder, but if they're interested in what you're doing, hell, they lay the book out for you. And you listen to them. We wanted to get drogue chutes. Well, we get a guy named Knappe. And he's from Germany. He's some bitch that invented the drogue chute, really, I think. Well, I'm pretty sure he was. And so we're talking about that. Hell, we had never had on our Hudson, his Hudson, we never had to have a drogue chute to stop that thing. So would you be interested in doing a project? Oh, yeah, Lord, I know. So he fixed this beautiful drogue chute on there. Oh. Everything was just the right size and the right wrinkle and everything. And
had a firing mechanism to shoot the drogue out.
Yeah, had like a firecracker. Fire the goddamn thing, boom, out go the drogue chute, go, and we had a lot of wall. Well, we couldn't use brakes, of course, at 360. We had Chevy truck brakes, wasn't it?
No, we had Halibrand brakes.
Halibrand, yeah.
Chevy, all four wheels.
Yeah.
Halibrand brakes on all four wheels.
Yeah.
We adapted them to the Chevy
spindles
and everything.
But you didn't want to touch them at 300 miles an hour.
Oh, God,
you
no.
could touch them all you wanted.
Wouldn't do anything.
Nothing happened.
No testing to that one.
You'd have fried the biscuits.
No, we just threw the drogue chute out and then just used the disc brakes at low speeds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite an error. So Ray and us guys had the first jet
That's it.
on the road. Yeah, sure did, and had the fastest doctor for, I guess, quite a while. I haven't heard of any.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Doc, he was very appreciative for all the work I did, all the nights I put in and everything. He delivered all three of our kids free.
Free of charge,
That's
yeah.
right.
And
You
this
should
one,
have had a bunch more.
He was a personal physician for all of us guys,
That's right.
He was our
Oh, sure.
personal doctor and delivered our
Yeah.
kids and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure who got the better end of the deal. I think we worked a little harder than he did.
I'm sure you did, Ray.
Is he still around?
He
No,
died
he
of cancer a
died,
few years ago.
But he was a funny guy. Ray, of course, all of us are funny. And so when Ray had this little baby, why, Doc says, look, if you see where that delivery room is, I'll open the door, and as soon as I get the baby out, I'll show you the baby and stand by with a camera. So Ray thought, oh, gee, that will be nice. So he had arranged this, and the door opens, and here's the goddamn monkey in Doctor's hand, and Ray,
No, the thing of it is, he pulled a fast one. There's a dark hospital corridor, you know, and he said, I'll bring the baby out in the hall so you can shoot a picture. He said, but I have to keep it covered up. When you're all set, let me know and I'll uncover it. So I had a Polaroid camera with a strobe on the thing. So he says, you all set, you focused? And he said, yeah, I'm focused. I'm looking through the eyepiece. And I said, okay. And he pulls the blanket back and I go, flash. And I thought, what was that? He had a monkey doll wrapped up in this swaddling clothes and everything. That was my first
that's the
born.
first, yeah.
That is funny. That is great.
So you meet some real good people, and hell, everybody wants to help you. We had the whole NASA crew there down there at night looking at that damn car, and hey, they helped us. And one thing that we needed some help on, the thing that imploded when we wound the jet engine up wide open, and the air ducts just, pow, bam, they blew up.
They just suck together?
Sucked together.
Yeah, we were trying to
Yeah.
tune the engine, we were running 100%. We were trying to get up to about 108% RPM so we get more power. So we had the thing tied down to a couple of trucks out there on the salt, and we were running at full throttle and we had a guy from Hill Air Force Base, one of their technicians, trying to adjust the throttle, get a little more pressure, and all of a sudden he goes, whoop, just closed up those ducts, those beautiful ducts we'd made, you know, it just collapsed them. So we had to go back to the drawing board and make new ducts with honeycomb filler and all that kind of stuff. We made some strong ones next time.
When the ducts collapsed,
just
didn't
collapsed.
that,
It shut off the air.
yeah, the engine,
engine
didn't
quit.
that destroy the engine?
No, it didn't go into the
Had
engine.
a
just-
screen over the compressor section,
Oh, okay.
so it saved us. Yeah.
Just collapsed the air.
But I would
That's-
think that
We're lucky.
having the air shut off that fast, you like when you turn off the water in a, fast,
Yeah,
We rattled around a little bit.
it runs.
yeah.
Yeah, but the guy come out, the technician did, checked it, and it had, what was it, 3,200 or 36, I can't remember. Anyway, it was right up to snuff on the horsepower. And that's pretty nice tune-up out there. Just hook it to a couple of trunks and lock the brakes on everything. And it gets 3,000 horsepower. The guy's down there tuning it. That was real neat. Well, we never had to adjust the valves on it
That's
or
right, we
change the
didn't.
spark plug, did we, Ray?
And then we went off-road racing. After that, we went
I want
off-road.
to know about that, because I followed that.
How'd that come about, Ack?
The road racing thing, well, that's when the gentleman offered me a ride, and I took a look at the driver, and I said, yeah, the hell with it, I'm not going to ride. So you drive it. So then I said, geez, I need a crew. So Doug Harrison, my good friend, he was going to ride with me. We're both getting a divorce, as I told you. And
One of many divorces.
oh no, two of them. We had two divorces.
No, Doug only had one.
Oh,
Ack had three. Ack had
Oh, no, but that was my first one's what I meant. That was the first one. Sure, I've had three. Christ, I'm 80 years old. It takes time, you know. It ain't gonna last
Ack was
forever.
married 3 times and divorced 3 times. He married these nice little housekeepers. All 3 of them kept the house when he got rid of him.
Yeah, that's
Housekeeping's all about.
that's a true story. Just think of me as your little housekeeper. Okay, honey, that's a nice thought. And 3 weddings lately, they all 3 kept my houses. Right to the true letter there of a little housekeeper. Oh, well, it's fun. But anyway, they did the thing at the time.
You were just trying to tell me about off-road.
Oh, then when the off-road thing really got going, that's about that time, and this Mexican road race was getting going. And of course, we were all good friends of Bill Straub, and he had the Lincolns, you know, Ford Motor Company, so on. So anyway, we talked to Bill and this and that, and so we could get wheels and
Yeah, but that's on the Mexican road race, Bill was not running, he was running Broncos in those days, not Lincolns.
no, the Lincolns.
No, I mean the off-road race.
Oh,
The
no.
Baja stuff.
I'm talking about the Mexican road
Yeah.
race. Yeah, he set up the cards for that. So a little of it started to thinking on the hot rod thing, but that's the main thing we had in mind was just using our own ingenuity and a Model T, which represents hot rodding, doesn't it?
Yeah,
About the best
sure
there is. And no one could sit in it. I'll never forget the time this Italian, I'll not mention his name, the photographer, says, "Sir, would you get in the car there, and I want to take a picture of you." He said, "Get out of here." I gotta get in that goddamn thing. So the story is a really true story. We started, and McAfee was riding with him, and this guy had the brand new Ferrari from flown in, and it was looking good, and goddamn, he's parked on the side of the road, and when we come by, and this is a guy that didn't want to sit in my car. Doug laughed like hell. He said, "I'm glad I'm sitting here." You know, Ernie's out there with the hood up and everything else. So we had some of the good things, but we had a lot of them drop out. Frank Curtis sponsored one car, and Carroll Shelby crashed, you know, and
Did you ever run that thing, Bill?
Never
You didn't,
did.
did you?
that was a bastard. And it was a long race, but I love mountains myself, and I love driving in the mountains, and like that was good. You better use your common sense. We see a lot of them that didn't, and they have a little plaque down there, Muerte, Luigi Calapa Paloma or somebody was killed right in that corner. It's all over
You learn
Mexico.
to read, you learn to read the mountainsides.
Oh, yeah.
Where the road's gonna go.
Oh, God. Well, I was really kind of an expert. In Southern California, we've got a few mountains. I tried them all.
Turnbull Canyon behind
Turnbull
Whittier.
Canyon
That's
is
his
where I
private
said
race
that.
course.
That's my private race course, Turnbull Canyon, yeah. And I would always go up there early in the morning when no one's there, and I'd come around this one corner one morning, and Whittier College was having a student practice on picking rocks out of the side of the mountain, and I come around and, you know, Jesus, these guys fell off of the mountain, and great hell. I called a little flack on that one from the policemen, but they knew what I was doing. So they said, "Knock it off, or call us, and we'll see if the canyon being used, you know, give you a little warning." Yeah, but I used to go up there and do all of my practicing. It had a lot of neat corners, just like the bad ones in Mexico, that I perceived them. But Mexico had a few trick things. They never knew how to make anything round, like the end of a bridge. They'd have the goddamn rock sticking up at the end of it, and you boom, land in the middle of the damn bridge. Hopefully you landed straight, and then the end you drop off, and that's the only time. But the road itself was, hell, it wasn't bad. I'd been on worse as far as that, and this was a brand new road, of course. But the beauty of it, really, that's where I met all the German boys, and then from that I got to know a lot of the English staff racing, and finally I wound up at Le Mans and got to meet them again. You meet a lot of friends, and
Did you drive at Le Mans?
yeah, no, I was just there looking at it, yeah.
He drove Mila Mila.
Yeah, I was going over to Mila Mila, and I drove
your
it.
car?
Yeah, with Frank Curtis's car, yeah. Yeah, that was neat. But that,
Now, that was during one of the regular Mila Milas. That was,
yeah, right, the last one. Yeah, that's when they ran off and killed about 7 kids.
yeah.
Yeah, and they stopped it.
They were killing off the Italian royalty.
Yeah, Di
Yeah,
Portago.
right.
Yeah, I was trying to remember.
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah, well, they had a little problem with that race. I could see why, but open road racing, especially with people standing on the corner, is not so open, is it?
No. But, you know,
That's
you,
where cars.
Off-road.
Yeah.
You two did some off-road.
We did a lot of off-road racing. As a matter of fact, in 1967, Ed Perlman and a couple other guys put together the initial Baja off-road race. And so Ack and I Ack came up with a car. He got a used car from Ford. He was doing some work for Ford as a Ranchero. It's 67 Ford Ranchero.
Yeah.
And we sort of fixed that thing up and went down to Mexico. It had a 6-cylinder engine in it, stick shift transmission, and no ground clearance. And we found out real quick that you need ground clearance when you're in Baja. And we tore off shocks and got high centered several times in the dust and what have you. And as a matter of fact, it took us 34 hours to get from Tijuana to La Paz, but we still won our class. So we thought, well, now we know how to do it. So we went home and we just decided next year we'd have a pickup truck. So I got a used pickup truck from Ford, painted bright green. No, it was sort of dull green. We call it old greeny, about the color of that truck over there. And we had another. Again, it had a 6-cylinder engine, a stick shift, and we went down there and did pretty good and won again in our class. And the next year we decided, well, we need a little horsepower, so we put in a V8. And then we put in an automatic transmission, then we put in power steering. Everybody thought we were crazy because you didn't do that kind of stuff with a race car, except we just went faster than everybody else, so everybody started copying us.
So were you riding with him?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd trade off and take turns.
I have a question. I've watched a lot of films of that, and I was always fascinated with off-road. How did you know where to go? I mean, there weren't any marks. What was there a trail or some kind, or?
There was a trail of sorts. And what would happen, you'd come to a spot where the trail got soft or got wet in the rainy season and so forth, so you'd peel off and go around this way or around this way. And first thing you know, you come to a spot that looked like it was going to be hard to get through, but there'd be 50 different trails going around it. You never knew where they all went. But everybody made their own trails.
Yeah.
And we made the mistake the first year of thinking we'd take a compass with us and know where we were going. We had no idea where that compass was pointing because all you did was wind around like a snake up and down that peninsula, you know. But we had a lot of fun. We as a matter of fact, one year we almost won the whole Mexican road race overall, the 500, I should say, not the Mexican road race, the Baja 500. We were leading the thing, and coming on the final leg back into Ensenada, and made a wrong turn and went down a road that kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and finally realized we were going to somebody's farmhouse. And by the time we got a place to turn around and headed back, we'd lost about 45 minutes, and I think we lost by maybe 10 minutes. But that's racing.
Yeah.
We finally wound up winning a couple of them, our classes. They're in classes. And
There was some off-road stuff going out here in the deserts out in the Mojave.
all the
Yeah,
time.
we ran needles a time or two. With Parker.
Sure did, Parker.
Parker.
And Las Vegas, we hit one off there. But, yeah.
Physically, that had to be really.
Oh, yeah, that was rough.
It was rough. I'll tell you one thing I did. I don't think I ever did this. One thing I did that was worse was offshore powerboat racing. That is rough. That water is hard. And I thought off-road racing was rough, but powerboat racing, when you're running 100 miles an hour and you're in deep chop and all that kind of stuff, it hurts real bad.
What were you in?
A Scarab. No, it wasn't a Scarab. It was a cigarette.
Yeah.
36-foot cigarette a friend of mine in Hawaii bought, and we thought we were going to be powerboat racers, so we raced it for one season. Then he sold it. He got hurting too.
What were you, the throttle guy or the steering guy?
He was the steering and throttle. I was the navigator. I was trying to pick up the waypoints and look for islands we're supposed to go around and things like that.
Did you see?
No, you had water in your face all the time.
I remember at the up in Seattle when they had the unlimited hydroplane race. They had huge bright targets at the end of the straightaways, because the guys in the boats were vibrating so badly, they couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's a miracle that they didn't run over when some guy would blow a prop or something, and he stalled in the water. It was always a danger that the other drivers couldn't see him at all.
You always had trouble, this was in the early days of, fairly early days of powerboat racing, and sort of like your J2 Allard, where you kept breaking stub axles on these things, that kept breaking out drives and things like that. They had the big,
If you
the big
jumped out
engine,
and over-revved and come back in.
big engines with out drives, and they'd snap shafts in those and things like that. And then you're stuck out there in the middle of the ocean with big waves, and you're trying to figure out how to disconnect the out drive so you can come back in on one engine. That got to be sort of
What
a,
did it have in it? Was it
had a couple of big Chevys, big 454 Chevys, Merc Cruisers. They were made by Mercury.
Uh-huh.
And they would run, I think we would run close to, in the later stages when we pumped them up a little bit, we were running close to 90 plus miles per hour.
Oh. That is really hard.
Now they run 140, 50, I don't know, they go ridiculous speeds.
Yeah, I've seen some of those big scarabs and those big cigarettes, and they're huge.
Water's pretty hard.
It is.
Yes, very hard.
And the one thing we didn't touch on, Bill, which is your category, and that is sports car racing.
Well, I know Ack did some sports car racing, because I saw in the...
Yeah, I was back somewhere in the pack. Well,
I'll tell you what, we're going to take a little break here, folks, and we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. I started to say that one of the things that you hadn't covered was the road racing.
Sports car racing, sports car road racing. And my first venture in that was, actually, I believe I was hanging around Hot Rod Magazine. I hadn't even gone to work for them in about 1951. I used to stop by all the time. And I was in Don Francisco's office. He was a technical editor at the time. And all of a sudden, some guy came in a Marine Corps uniform, officer's uniform, and he wanted to talk to somebody about an Olds engine and how to do this and how to do that. And we invited him to sit down, and his name was Gary Laughlin. He was from Texas. He had been a Corsair pilot in the Marine Corps during World War II, and he'd been called back in for the Korean deal in 1950 or 51, whenever it was that happened. 51, I believe. And he was stationed now out at El Toro. And he and another fellow by the name of Skip Swartley, or Swarthout, one of the two, had bought a slightly used and abused Allard J2 with an Oldsmobile engine and a 3-speed Cadillac transmission. And they were having troubles keeping the thing running, so they asked Don Francisco, who was a technical editor, and I was sort of his pal and helped him. We had a shop together out in Monterey Park. He used to work on stuff. They asked if we'd help them out. We said sure, so we got in there and started helping them out, and all of a sudden I find myself driving this Ford pickup hauling this car all over the West Coast, as far east as Litchfield Park in Arizona. You were there, I believe, up to Pebble Beach, California, Moffett Air Force Base, the old airport out at the Chino Airport out by Chino or Ontario, out in the middle of alfalfa fields. We even ran one time, I believe, down on Terminal Island.
Right.
Santa Barbara. Any place that had an old airfield, we had a race. And I was dragging this car around on weekends to go to the races, and then just like Doc's car, we'd work on a thing every night trying to rebuild it and trying to replace all the pieces, all the axles that would snap, and replace all the leaks stop all the leaks in the gas tank. Did you have leaks in your gas tank?
We didn't have a problem. You mentioned that that wasn't the problem we had. The problem we had was gearboxes always on the verge of failing. We'd throw the cases away one time, and the next time we'd throw the gears away. After the race, you'd open up the drain, it'd come out like gray paint. All the hard chrome had just gone off.
Well, our car was not as pretty nor as successful as yours. Fortunately, you had a nice new car, I think, from the beginning.
It was brand new.
And it hadn't been worked over like this other one had. So we were constantly compensating for somebody else's problems. But we had a lot of fun, and that's where I first met you. As a matter of fact, you were working for us on the Peterson. You were an ad salesman for Sports Car Graphic, weren't you?
Right, that was one of, yeah. Pete, I heard about this, they were starting a sports car magazine, and I went in and Pete Peterson himself interviewed me, and he said, "What do you know about advertising?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "You're hired."
That's Pete.
That must have been about the same time I went to work for Hot Rod, about 53.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But anyway, that's how I got into sports car racing. Then Ack got into sports car racing. He built a little car, and I was sort of hanging around when he built this little car. It had a fiberglass Devon body, which was copied off of what? A little Ferrari, wasn't it?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
It was. Somebody took a splash.
Bill Devon just took a mold off of the little Ferrari. I forget the name.
Dino or something like that. I forget what it was, but anyway.
But it was a shapely little thing, and he sold them like hotcakes, and so he gave me one, and then I guess I helped a little, and he sold them things. I'll never forget, the guy that works for me, Jack Lufkin, he come right out of the Air Force, and he comes up to me, gives me this address. He says, "I've read all about you, and I just got out of the Army. I'm not married. I want to go to work for you." "Well," I says, "there's a problem here. Mechanics don't make a lot of money. I don't care about that. I want to just get paid for what I can do for you." And I thought, well, this is a guy who's ready, so I hired him. And that's 45 years ago, and he still won't go. So in the meanwhile, I got him hot rodding, and he's one of the first guys to go 300 miles an hour in a Chevy Streamliner. Yeah, and we did it with Bosch fuel injection. He and I together thought, oh, this is the only thing. Of course, in them days, all you had was a carburetor, holly. And so we put the German fuel injection on it, and made him run decent. We could start him and idle him, and he'd go 292, 293, never any problem, never a miss. But so he loved that end of it. And this morning, he and I went out, or yesterday, or whenever, yesterday, went out to the desert to see one of our cars run.
Out to El Mirage again.
Yeah, El Mirage. And one of them with a flathead Ford, this guy. Made the cutest little thing. I like it. But it's a flathead Ford. And of course, I used to run them. And I remember I set 3 records once up at there with a big engine at 172 and the stock Ford engine at 162 or 3. And then the little VH60, I went 140 some mile an hour with that. I did it all in 2 hours. I had this thing, it's a car I built called Miller's Missile at that time. Ray didn't take any pictures. And anyway, we come out of the thing
He used
with
to
it.
build the world's ugliest cars.
And these things was just changed in nothing flat. I could change an engine actually in a half an hour, easy. And each one of them had their own exhaust pipe, just click, click, click. And I set 3 records in 2 hours. And in them days, you had to go down, 4 miles, and then come back home 4 miles, and go to work and change it.
They're still running to El Mirage several times during the summer. Then, of course, they go to Bonneville for the big events. But how was it up there yesterday? It wasn't too warm, was it? Pretty nice.
Yeah, and it's just beautiful up at yesterday. Yeah.
He went up to Muroc in 1935 when you're 15 years old, right?
Yeah, that's right.
My first trip to the Dry Lakes was about 1939. When I was 13, I rode up in the rumble seat of an old 35 Chevy and froze to death all the way up there.
God.
And my uncle took me up there. He was a mechanic. That's how I got started on cars. He was a mechanic, and I used to hang around his shop and clean up his tools and try to clean out all the whiskey bottles he collected.
Hey, wait a minute.
But
A drunk mechanic? How dare you?
anyway, we had a lot of fun, and it's been a long career of playing with cars, and I haven't regretted a moment of it.
It's a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
And it's, the thing is, the greatest education that I really got into I love to read, and that was one of my things. I taught my dad how to speak English. He come over. He wouldn't allow me to speak Danish. Not in his house. You're going to speak English, that's it. And I look at that and I see these Mexican kids. They're 29 years old and they can't speak English. And I wonder, what the hell are they doing? And my brothers, same way. I had 3 brothers. They were speaking English in 3 weeks. Man, they wanted to get into this country and get going. And of course, during the Depression, how the hell you didn't get going very fast. But they learned.
What happened to your iron horse? Is that car still around?
It's over in the museum. A replication of it over in Hot Rod Museum.
Oh,
That's
in
Hot Rod
Pomona.
Museum.
oh, okay.
Yeah, the old caballo there. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy wanted to make it, and I helped him what I could, and he made a very good replica of it. Everything.
What about the original?
Oh,
The
I
original
don't
got
know.
cannibalized, became a hangar queen when he was building the Mila Mia
okay.
car. Started
Yeah.
stealing parts and pieces, rear ends, and this and that and the other thing. And pretty soon, it ended up outside the garage, and people started picking
Picking pieces.
pieces off of it. So there was very little left when this fellow by the name of Bruce Glasscock wanted to replicate the car.
Yeah.
But Ack gave him all the advice he could, and he came to me, and I came up with pictures and articles and so forth. And he did a nice job, and I think maybe there's 2 or 3 pieces off of the car that are off the original car that are someplace along the
Yeah,
line.
I think so.
But for the most part, it's just a replication of what there was.
Yeah.
He did do the part like the transmission, you know. That was well, where would
He put it at
find?
4-speed. He
Yeah,
cheated.
where would he find a 35 Nash overdrive anyway?
Oh,
They quit making that car when Jesus was a boy, I think.
You know, going back to this car, the appearance of the old El Caballo,
it was
the,
really ugly.
the
Ugly.
Mexicans used to call it ensalada.
Yeah.
Because it was a salad.
Salad bowl.
Everything you could throw into a salad, you just throw everything in there and stir it up, and that was the. And one time we were in 1954, I believe it was, we came through Mexico City on the day of the race, and here's this big Mexico La Prensa daily newspaper. It has a big picture of El Caballo sort of at a 45-degree angle, running right off the page, you know. And they loved that car. It was the ugliest thing in the world, and they thought it was great.
Oh, yeah.
It would, yeah, I could.
Well, it's
see
the way they'd make a car. Just gathering everything
Don't try
together.
to bend anything, just, you know, if it's straight, if it's this long, it's gonna be this long.
Yeah.
Cut it, we'll just weld it right there, you know.
They,
I've been impressed. I got
they
stranded
loved it.
down in Mexico.
They loved to
times.
talk about it in the papers, and they even had a lottery on when we were going to come in.
Oh, really?
Oh, sure. There was the Mexican people really liked it. Well, hell, it was the closest thing to them that there was running. And you know, that one thing that the European boys to the man said, yeah, what we liked about that car, it was original.
Definitely.
He said it was original. It wasn't like Enzo Ferrari, and we built one just like Tony Boboli. I said, well, it wasn't. No bastard ever built one like that again.
That's for sure.
But that's the one thing they liked. And it took me a lot of introduction. Gosh, when I was in Le Mans, I was invited into the British head thing, and I was the first Jag. I love that car. I still do. I'd like to have a D-Jag. I've always
That was a
had.
beautiful car.
Oh, I love that car. The only thing wrong, they had wire wheels, and you know what happened to Lord Blair and his wire wheels. Because it happened to the Italians. They brought them over here when I was working for Ford. Why, they brought the Ferraris over, and they were going to do the thing with the 4.9 Ferrari, and the goddamn wheels buckled.
That's
At
right.
Indy.
Ascari brought a Ferrari over in 1953 for
Yeah.
Indianapolis, and he ran about 20 laps and the wheel collapsed.
Wire wheels. You know, when I was over there, I remember vividly these guys. I would argue. I loved the debate, and so the English guys up there, Miller, how come you got that ugly Yankee car down in the pit right below there? Well, I said, that may be ugly, but it's the fastest goddamn car down in the pits. Oh, you think you could get a new Bentley? They just come out with that new goddamn streamlined Bentley. I said, if it's got that 6-cylinder goddamn engine in it, I'll run it on foot and beat it. And they laughed. So we went out and had a race with it, and hell, my Oldsmobile kicked ass. Heavy duty on all that. I don't bring me that English crap. I said, you guys make up all your speeds. In California, we test them. We know how fast they go, and they don't run. So there, the Olympic guys, they like that to create a little rhubarb. So this guy says, "Hey, well, I'll have me guy technician come and tune this thing up a little, baby, and we'll try it again." Don't be that silly. I said, you had your ass beat bad, and you're not going to do any better. We had just had a lot of fun with them guys over there. Good people. And I met Dennis Jenkins real well. Of course, he rode with Sterling in the Mila.
This is sort of digressing a moment, but I just got back from Goodwood Festival Speed last Tuesday, I guess it was, over there. You know, you've been to have you been to the festival?
No, I haven't.
You've got to go. But anyway, they have about 300 cars and some old bikes and so forth. They're all antique type stuff. And they're just demo type runs for the most part. Some of the guys get all excited to start doing timed runs up the Lord March's driveway. But I was instrumental in getting a couple of cars for them over, a couple of hot rods. One of them was a Hemi Dodge, Dick Landy's Hemi Dodge, in 1970 model. And the other one was a Hemi under glass, a wheel standing car. You remember seeing that one?
Yeah.
And you never saw anything so like this in your life. We went over there, and the British are very reserved and so forth. And this Hemi under glass come out and line up on the starting line, and he did a big wheel stand, and he has titanium rubbing blocks to throw sparks off the and he runs down off the starting line with the wheels in the front wheels in the air for about 200 or 300 yards, and then sets it down, and all of a sudden I see people running around. What's going on? They're all running around with fire extinguishers. He set the hay bales on fire. And it's the funniest thing in the world to see the English, particularly, who are very reserved and so forth, coming up and introducing, like Sterling Moss introducing himself to Bob Riggle, the driver of the Hemi under glass, and congratulating him and so forth. You just wouldn't think that would happen, but they recognize,
Right.
mechanical expertise.
Well, they came over here and they found out that Southern California produces some pretty fast people and cars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was working for Ford at the time the English come over, and they wanted to run Indy. And their thing, well, that's an Offenhauser. What are you going to use for horsepower? I say a 300, your stock Ford. What? Oh, yes. So when I went out and looked at instead of a 3/4 inch bolt like Frank Curtis would use, they had a little 1/4 inch job in there. Everything was cut down to nothing. There was no weight, and of course, they made them a new set of heads on a stock Ford. It did. It run right up there with the office.
They finally learned, though. Was it Cooper with the rear engine?
No.
Cooper also, Colin Chapman. Chapman used to use the engine.
Come over
He attached everything to the back of the block, and they start,
But he put the fear of God in.
Well, he put the
he
fear of
did
God in
that.
people like Jimmy Clark and some of those people too. They
Yeah.
claim that he was responsible for a number of people getting hurt.
True. Yeah.
It's too light.
Yeah.
Well, his cars were very fragile.
Yeah.
Fragile and fast, yeah.
Anything you'd like to add? You're retired now, Ray, are you?
I'm retired.
You're
I'm retired.
I have a daughter who lives in Australia, so we go to Australia once a year, and I have a lot of friends over there who are involved in all sorts of activities with boats and cars. As a matter of fact, over in Australia, what we used to call off-road racing, they call bashes. And they have these bashes where they take the old stock cars, this early 60 model Fords and all that kind of stuff, and fix them up with roll bars and go off-road racing. And they have some off-road territory over there you can't believe.
I believe.
It makes Baja in some cases look like a paved road. And so I've been with a couple of my friends over there on some of the bashes too,
Uh-huh.
running up through the outback up to the top of Cape York and all that.
Wow. Well, that's great. Well, I want to thank you both for coming in this morning, and Thank you, folks, for watching.
Yeah.
Thank
it's
you,
a
we enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Yeah.